Week 4 of Playbook. I'm so excited for this. Listen, my prayer for this week is that you would find healing. Because I know a lot of you have been through a lot. This week we're talking about scars, and I know that can carry a heavy, heavy load and a heavy burden on you. In that a lot of times you've been hurt and you've been caused so much pain and such deep pain that it's been really, really hard to get by. And so what I want us to do today is I want us to look at scars, and hopefully by the end of the service what we're able to do is we're able to find hope, and we're able to use those scars for good instead of letting those scars use us. When I was in 7th grade, I was in the boys' locker room, and me and one of my best friends had been talking, and we were going to wrestle. Both of us thought we were the biggest, strongest guys in the class, and we wanted to prove it. And so we had been talking to everybody, and we had been telling them the wrestling match is going down, and we are fixing to do this thing. And so we get up into the locker room, and we are in the boys' locker room, and it's upstairs, and it's got a thin floor on it. And so we're up there, and all the guys are standing around, and they're chanting like, "Come on, do it! Yeah, take him out!" And half of them are for him, half of them are for me, and they're just cheering around, and everything. And so we're in 7th grade, and so I do what every guy does when it's time to wrestle. You take your shirt off. No normal guy wrestles with his shirt on. And so I go to take my shirt off, and when I go to take my shirt off, my friend, right as I get it over my head, I'm pulling it off over my head, right as I get my hands right here, I hear what sounds like an elephant running across the room. And it's just goo-goo, 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 goo-goo. And I hear this war cry, "Ah!" And he's just running as fast as he can right towards me. And my shirt is over my head, and I can barely see through him. And I see him coming. And I'm doing everything I can to get my arms back down. And he hits me as hard as he can, just forms tackles me. Boom! And just crushes me. And I'm laying on the ground. And he stands up, and he's like, "Yeah, champion!" And I stand up, and I have these carpet burns all over my back, all down my arm, and still to this day, like 6 years later, I'm not that old, so 6 years later, I still have these scars from when I was in 7th grade wrestling my buddy. And that night we were going to a basketball game. And so as I show up to the basketball game, I've got bandages from here all the way up, all the way around my back. And my mom and dad look at me and they're like, "What happened to you?" And I'm like, "Well, you should see the other guy." And he was standing right behind me, and he was like, "Yeah, you should." Like, I won. And so I was like, dang it. But some of us still to this day, no matter how long ago the hurt was, no matter how long ago the pain was, man, we're still affected by the scars. Because if I took this jacket off, I could show you right here, I've got the scars from that 7th grade wrestling match. And some of you, it's the way you were raised. Some of you, it's the relationships that you've had. For some of you, your past has brought upon scars in your life that have caused some deep, deep hurt and some deep pain. And so what I want us to do today is I want us to look at scars. And I want us to see what Jesus did with his scars. And how maybe you and I can take a different approach to those scars and begin to use those in order to help people. Begin to use those to change somebody else's life. Maybe we can't go back and change the scars that are in our life, but maybe, just maybe, those scars can help somebody else. And maybe those scars can detour somebody from going down the path that you went down. Because maybe those scars have happened from other people, or maybe they're self-inflicted. And maybe you've caused some scars on your life to where you want to throw your hands up as a roadblock, as a caution sign, and just say, "Don't go down this path. Don't go this direction, because if you do, this is what's going to happen. Like, this is what could happen to you if you go down this path. And so don't go down this path." And so that's what I want us to do today. And so if you have your Bibles, open up to John chapter 20 is where we're going to be today, starting in verse 24. And it says this: "But Thomas, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. And the other disciples were saying to him, 'We have seen the Lord.' But he said to them, 'Unless I see his hands and the imprint of the nails, and put my fingers into the place of the nails, and put my hands into his side, I will not believe.' After 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. And Jesus came, and the doors were shut. And he stood in the midst and he said, "Peace be with you." And then he looked at Thomas and said, "Reach here with your finger and see my hands. Reach here with your hands and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but be believing." And Thomas answered and said, "My Lord, my God." And Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who do not see me, yet believe." See, what's going on here? Jesus had died on the cross. Thomas was with them and watched him as they nailed him to that tree. Thomas was watching them as they whipped Jesus and they ripped the skin from his body. Thomas was with them when he saw the nails go through his head, and as Jesus comes out and they place him on that cross and they take the nails and they shove the nails through his hands and through his feet. And then as he hangs on the cross, they take that spear and they jab it into his side. And they watched as they took his lifeless body off of the cross, carried it to a tomb, wrapped him in his cloth, and then laid him in the tomb. And Thomas watched as the stone was rolled in front of the tomb. And Thomas stood in disbelief. As the disciples told them, "You weren't here, Thomas, but I promise we saw Jesus. You weren't with us, but I promise He's alive. He's no longer dead. He has risen from the grave. He has conquered the grave. He's not dead anymore. Thomas, He's alive." And Thomas could not believe it. And Thomas said, "There's no way. And I'm not going to believe you until I place my fingers right in the holes where the nails went through. Until I place my hand right on the side where they pierced the side." Because I was standing there and I saw Him. And I saw the nails go through His flesh, and I saw the spear go into His side. And when the spear went in, He didn't react. He was dead. And I watched as they took His lifeless body off the cross and they laid Him in the tomb. He's not alive. This is a cruel joke, guys. You don't joke about this stuff. In 8 days, 8 days of waiting, 8 days of the disciples telling Him, "Thomas, He's alive. I promise you we saw Him. I promise He was standing right in the midst of us. We saw the scars where the nails went through. We saw His side. He showed us like it's Jesus." Thomas says, "No way. I've got to see Him for myself." See, what you have to understand is Thomas is known for this one moment in his entire life. See, out of all the things that Thomas had done, out of all the miracles that Thomas had experienced, out of all the paths that Thomas had taken, out of all the times that Thomas had been with the disciples, Thomas was known for one thing. He was known as Doubting Thomas for the rest of his life. You see, some of us have been known by some of the worst things that we've done. Some of us are known for some of those moments that we wish more than anything we could take back. You know, angry Adam over there, he just flies off the handle. It was one time I got mad. Like, I didn't mean to get mad. I got mad one time, and now all of a sudden I have anger issues. Like, I'm just known all of a sudden as this person who has anger issues. Or Stinky Scott. It was this one time we were in the car. It was raining, and the windows were up. Like, it just came out of nowhere. It wasn't my fault. But now I'm known for the rest of my life as Stinky Scott. Come on. But there's sometimes in your life where you're known for that one moment that you wish more than anything you could take back. Don't you wish and think that Thomas more than anything is like, "Oh man, if I could only go back. Man, if I could only go back." And when my friends told me that Jesus was alive, I wouldn't doubt it. I would just say, "I can't wait to see Him. I know He's alive. I can't wait to see Him." But I didn't. I spent that whole time doubting. I spent 8 days telling them there's no way that He's alive. There's no way. I don't believe it. And then all of a sudden, all the disciples were together. And as they're sitting there and they're telling Thomas, "Thomas, I promise you, man, Jesus, He was here. He was standing in front of us. He's alive." And Thomas is like, "Guys, it's not that big of a place. Like, shouldn't we have bumped into Him by now? It's been 8 days. Like, we know where He likes to eat. He hangs out with us right here. Like, why have we not bumped into Him again?" And the door is shut and locked. And all of a sudden, the disciples' eyes get really big. "Behind you." Like, what? "He's behind you." And Thomas turns around and there stands Jesus. And Jesus says, here's my scars, Thomas. Here's proof. Here's proof of hope. Here's proof of life. See, what you have to understand is your scars can have a purpose. Even though your scars have caused so much pain, even though your scars have hurt so deep, even though for some of you your scars have not healed, they still can find purpose. And so I want us to look at a couple things. The first thing is this: what you have to understand is Jesus knew that his scars would offer hope. See, Jesus knew that his scars had a purpose and a plan. And Jesus knew when he held out his hands and you see the scars, you know that that's the Son of God, that's the Messiah who went to the cross, who paid my price that I deserve, but yet he conquered sin, he conquered death, and now he's alive, and I see his scars, I see the wounds, I see what he went through. And I know if he went through that, then I can just stand up and I can share with everybody what Jesus has done. Because those scars have changed my life. And those scars have brought me hope. But maybe some of you today, you're sitting out here and you're thinking that my scars are really deep. Because maybe for some of you, you're still living with the past scars. Because in high school, you were bullied. Because you had people who said things about you that when you would walk a corner, you became so insecure. And you still haven't even found security in yourself because of the words that people have spoken over you. And still, when you turn a corner and you walk into a room and people are laughing, you automatically assume that they're laughing at you because of the scars that have been placed on your body to this day. And it happened so long ago, but yet to this day, you haven't found security in yourself because you feel like every time I walk in the room, they must be talking about me because they used to talk about me. And you've got scars that are so deep and that hurt so bad that you're still dealing with the pain. Maybe for some of you, it's physical abuse. Maybe when you were raised in a home that when you did something or your mom and dad got mad, instead of correcting you the way that they're supposed to correct you, maybe they raised their hand and they started hitting you. And to this day, you don't know how to handle it. And to this day, you don't know what to do. Maybe it was sexual abuse. And maybe for some of you, growing up, you suffered tremendous pain and torture. And to this day, it's hard to trust somebody. It's hard to trust the opposite sex because of what somebody has done for you. It's hard to trust family members because of what they've done to you. And you can't get past the pain. And you can't get past the scars. Maybe for you, it's that you were never loved. And maybe you never heard that I love you. Maybe you never heard I'm proud of you. And so today you find it hard because of the scars that were on your body. You find it hard to say those words. And you so desperately want to say those words, but you find it so hard because they were never spoken to you. And so it sounds almost like a foreign language to you. Maybe it's verbal abuse. Maybe you could never do anything right. And maybe every time you walk into the room, you were getting yelled at, you were getting screamed at. And you suffered verbal abuse. Maybe it's drugs. Maybe it's alcohol. Maybe it's divorce. I had a student of mine come over to the house when I was a youth pastor. And when students would come over to the house, Heather and I, if they stayed late enough and we put the kids to bed, they were involved in that process because we would not sacrifice what we normally did for our kids just because people were over. And so what we would do is we would get everybody involved. And so we would take those students into the kids' rooms and we would sing songs with them and then we'd pray with them. And I'd make every student in the room, even if they had never prayed before, I made them pray. And I made them pray over my kids. I made them pray blessing. I made them pray life. I made them pray hope over my kids. And then we would just pray for each other in that room. And we left that room one night, and one of the kids was just, he was standing in the living room, and he was almost sobbing uncontrollably. I was like, what's wrong, man? And he said, I've never seen that before. So I've never experienced that. He goes, Johnny, this isn't my home. This isn't what I'm used to. He goes, Johnny, my parents are drug addicts. And he goes, it's so bad. He goes, I have to go buy their drugs for them. He goes, I bring the drugs home. And he goes, I'll load them in a needle for them. He goes, I've never seen anything like this. And he just sat there and sobbed. He's like, I want my family and my future to be like this. See, maybe some of you, you've got a past. Maybe some of you, the scars that you're experiencing right now are scars that are self-inflicted. Maybe it's scars that you've brought on yourself. And you've got scars in your life because of decisions that you've made and because of things that you've done. And so what I want us to do today is I want us to look at 3 things that we can do in order to use these scars. But what you have to understand is before you can ever use your scars to help somebody else, because that's what Jesus was doing. Jesus was saying these scars bring hope. These scars bring life. These scars bring a future. This was pain to me. And it was suffering that I never want anybody to endure. That's why I went through it. I suffered so that you don't have to. And so maybe we can use our scars to say, I've gone down a path and I've experienced some things in my life that I don't want you to experience, that I don't want you to go down. And so I'm going to use these scars in order to help you, in order to change the direction and the path that you're taking right now. But listen, before you can ever begin to use your scars, the first thing that you have to do is you have to find healing. You have to find healing for yourself. Because listen, one of the worst things that you can do is try to use your pain and your brokenness before it's ever healed. Because if you don't let it heal, then it could last the rest of your life. Because you just keep pulling the scab. And every time somebody talks about it, instead of being able to use your story to help them, you hear the story and it just rips the scab off. And it just continues to rip the scab off. About 6 years ago, I was playing basketball. And when I was playing basketball, I did this crossover that was, it was sweet. It brought the guy to his knees. I was like, boom, boom, crossover, jumper right in the eye, and I'm standing there. But when I was standing there, it was like the Karate Kid move, because I went boom, and then I went, and when I did, I felt something in this ankle, and I was like, but I still hit the jumper, played through, went a couple more rounds. It was truly a heroic effort on my part. And so it's still talked about to this day on pickup courts everywhere. And so I came home and I'm not a wimp when I get hurt, but I was crying, and Heather was like, what's wrong? And I'm like, nothing. I was like, how did you even know something was wrong? I don't show it. And she's like, you're sobbing like a baby curled up in the middle of the floor, like something's wrong. I'm like, no, I was praying. And so I was like, my ankle, I think I did something. And she's like, you need to go get it looked at. I'm like, no, I'm fine. So a couple days later, I go and I get it x-rayed, and sure enough, I cracked one of my bones in my ankle. And so they're like, we need to put a cast on. I'm like, I don't want a cast. I hate cast. So they put a cast on it, and it's up to my knee. And I'm walking out of there, and I'm like, this. They're like, you have to be in it 8 to 12 weeks. And I'm walking out, and I'm like, this is the worst thing in the world. This is so uncomfortable. I cannot wear this thing. I get home, Heather drops me off, she runs some errands, and I'm at home by myself. And when I was home, I went and found an old wood saw. And I sit down. And I was like, this thing's coming off right now. And I begin to saw that cast. First of all, that was really hard. It did not work very well at all. And I'm sweating. I'm like, good grief. Well, finally I get the whole thing cut. And when I get it cut, I begin to yank as hard as I can. And I'm like, "Argh!" And I pull it. And finally I get it just enough to where I got it separated. And it's pressing against my shin and my calf. And it hurts so bad. I'm like, this was not a good decision. But nobody can walk around with a cut cast. I got to get this thing off. And so I begin just ripping as hard as I can. And it hurts so bad, I'm crying. And I begin to pray, and I'm like, God, Please give me the strength of Samson. If he can push two pillars apart and push a building down, God, at least give me the strength to just rip a cast off my foot. Please, dear Lord. And I'm yanking as hard as I can. And I'm like, and it's just not working. And I thought going past my shin was going to be the worst part. But then I realized, oh yeah, there's a broken bone in my foot. And when I got to my ankle and I'm trying to pull that thing apart and it is pressing right where it's broke, oh my goodness, it was so much pain. And I just yank and yank and nobody's home and I'm screaming. The police were called. They were like, somebody's getting murdered in the house. We hear it. He is begging for his life. We can hear him in there. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm just taking a cast off. And so finally I get the cast off. And I'm like, oh, whew, perfect. Heather comes home and she's like, where's the cast? And I'm like, well, it didn't fit, fell off. And so, but now here's the thing. That was years ago. And still to this day, because I did not properly let it heal, I still feel pain in my ankle. Listen, if you don't let your wounds heal properly, you will feel pain for the rest of your life. Some of you are trying to move forward too fast, and you're not letting the healing process take place. You're not letting the love and the words of God wash over you. You're not letting them bring comfort and bring peace. You're not letting Him heal your heart. Because when a scar begins to be healed, it's healed through different tissue than what's normal. Listen, when God brings healing to your life, He doesn't heal you the same way that He created you. He heals you with the strength and the power that only He can offer, that other people don't understand, that other people can't fathom. I don't know how you can get through that. I don't know how you can deal with that. I don't know how you've got that scar in your life, but yet you're using it for good and not letting it use you. And so now all of a sudden, God begins to do a work and you begin to get healed. Listen, the first step with your scars is you have to be healed before you can ever bring healing to somebody else's life. Make sure you're healed. Don't reopen the wounds that are in your life. Let God work in you and bring that healing. And listen, if you need to talk with somebody, if you need to find people that will point you to Jesus and help bring healing to your life. Not just sit and talk about what took place, but help bring healing and closure. And so 3 things that I want us to look at today really quick as we fly through this. The first one is this. Use your scars after you've been healed as a warning sign. Use your scars as a warning sign for other people. Use your scars to throw up your arms and to say, I've been down that path. I've been there. I've walked in your shoes. I know what you're going through. I know how you're feeling. I know how you're staying up late at night and you can't sleep anymore. I know how you don't trust people. I know what you're dealing with. I know what you're going through. And listen, I want to help you. I want to help bring healing. I want to use my story in order to help you so that you can get through what you're getting through. And through your story, healing can begin to come to their body. Healing can begin to come to their heart. Healing can begin to come to their mind when you're able to use your story in order to bring life, in order to bring hope. But listen, using your story and using your scars does not minimize what you've been through. I'm not telling you that it doesn't hurt. I'm not telling you that it doesn't matter. I'm not telling you that there's not great pain in the scars that you have suffered. There are. But I'm telling you this, if you don't use your scars, then your scars will use you. If you don't begin to use your scars, then what you will end up doing is your scars will begin to control your life. Because everywhere you go, everything you do, they're going to begin to control you. Because now all of a sudden, trust was stolen. And when trust was stolen, you can't trust anybody else. And so now you draw yourself away from relationships. And it's beginning to control you instead of saying, I'm not going to let this control me anymore. I don't know how to get past it, but God, every morning I'm waking up, I'm falling on my knees, and I know you can help me. You can heal my heart. You can heal my mind, and I can get past this. That doesn't mean I forget about it and act like it doesn't happen. That doesn't mean it's not a big deal. That doesn't mean people shouldn't be punished for what's happened. But what it does mean is I'm not waking up anymore and letting this scar dictate who I am. Let this pain and this hurt dictate who I am. I'm going to use it in order to help somebody else. Because God's brought healing to my life in a way that I never thought possible. Because some of you are dealing with scars and pains that are so deep that you don't even think there's healing and there's hope out there. But I want you to understand that God brings healing and God brings hope to the brokenhearted and to the hurting. And He offers that to you no matter what you are going through right now, no matter what you are facing, no matter how deep. God is offering that hope and that healing. But God also wants you to use it for wisdom. God wants you to use this pain, this scar, in order to deter people from ever walking down the path that you've walked down. I read this story on Facebook about a mom who was posting about her son. And she said, "It breaks my heart to post this, but I believe in the power of prayer and we need prayers. Our son Jaden is 25 years old and fighting for his life. And he's been diagnosed with lipoid pneumonia, and it's oil in his lungs, and severe lung damage associated with vaping. Today is day 4 as respiratory ICU. He has respiratory failure and can't breathe on his own. I have struggled with the decision to post this, but I've come to the conclusion that maybe my son's story will help someone. Lung damage and vaping is becoming an epidemic across the country, and I hope this post will help bring someone some awareness." That's a scar. That is deep. That's a scar that hurts. But they want to use their scar as a warning sign. They want to use their scar as wisdom to say, don't go down this path. Because what you think is so minimal, what you don't think is a big deal, can turn into something that is so overwhelming, that brings so much pain and so much heartache. You can use your scars to bring hope and to bring wisdom into a situation. But not only that, the last one is this, the scars of hope. Listen, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've gone through, there's hope at the end of the tunnel. There's light at the end of the tunnel. No matter how dark it feels right now, no matter how much pain you're going through right now, there is hope at the end of that tunnel. See, you have to understand, maybe the scars that you have caused is self-inflicted. And maybe you're sitting here today and you're saying, I don't have a lot of scars on myself, but I've caused a lot of scars. See, what you have to understand is the scars on Jesus' body are greater than any scars that you have on yours or any scars that you have caused for anybody. God's forgiveness is greater than anything that you have done. And for some of us, what we need to hear today is, I've made a mistake as a parent. I've made a mistake as a friend. I've made a mistake as a person, and I have caused deep, deep wounds, and I want forgiveness today, and I am so sorry for what I've done. Listen, that does not mean just because you've caused the scars, there won't be punishment. There may be punishment for you. You may have to suffer the consequences for the scars that you've caused, but you have to understand, God's forgiveness is still available, even though the scars feel so deep. Even if you can't forgive yourself, God looks at you and says, you are forgiven. Listen, no matter how deep the scars are in your life and no matter how much you feel like, I can't forgive them, God is saying, I forgave you. And I want you to live a life of forgiveness, because the burden of unforgiveness will rob you of joy, happiness, and peace. Don't let the scars control you, but take hold of what has happened in your life and use those scars to bring hope and life to somebody else. That you can now use these scars and say, Jesus offers hope. Jesus offers life. And I'm going to use these scars to bring life and hope to somebody's life. And so today, here's my prayer for you. And this is a hard message because I don't want you to ever think that I'm minimizing what you've been through and that I am flippantly talking about this. Because it's one thing for me to talk about forgiveness. It's one thing for me to talk about scars. It's one thing for me to talk about healing. It's another thing to walk through it. But I want you to understand that God offers a peace that passes all understanding. Where you don't see peace, where you don't see hope, where you don't see a future, God is standing in front of you with a scarred body, saying, I offer something that you can't fathom. I want to give you a life that you deserve. I want to give you a future that is greater than your past. I want to give you a hope that you can't understand. Will you pray with me?